The moon hung low over Millbrook. Its eerie glow cast long shadows across the empty streets. A gentle breeze rustled through the trees, carrying with it an unsettling chill. The small town, usually bustling with life, now stood eerily silent. Streetlights flickered, their dim light barely piercing the darkness. The local diner's neon sign blinked on and off, casting an intermittent red glow on the cracked sidewalk below. A stray dog howled in the distance, its mournful cry echoing through the deserted streets. The town clock struck midnight, its chimes reverberating through the still air. In the park, the rusty swings creaked softly, moved by an unseen force. Something was coming to Millbrook. The Johnson family lived in a cozy two-story house on Elm Street. Tom, a local mechanic, and his wife Sarah, a kindergarten teacher, were settling in for the night. Their teenage daughter Emily was upstairs, engrossed in her smartphone. Tom flicked through channels on the TV, the blue light illuminating his tired face. Sarah bustled around the kitchen preparing lunches for the next day. Emily scrolled through her social media feed, oblivious to the world outside her room. Upstairs, the family cat, Whiskers, sat perched on the windowsill. His ears twitched, and he let out a low growl. But the Johnsons, wrapped up in their normal evening activities, paid no heed to the cat's unusual behavior. As the night wore on, peculiar events began to unfold in Millbrook. At the local hospital, Dr. Anderson furrowed his brow in confusion. Patients who had been declared dead hours ago were showing signs of movement. He dismissed it as a trick of the light, fatigue playing tricks on his mind. Across town, Officer Martinez was on his usual night patrol. He noticed an unusual number of people stumbling around the streets. Their movements were jerky, uncoordinated. He assumed they were drunk and continued driving, unaware of the horror that was about to unfold. At the Johnson house, Sarah was jolted awake by a loud crash outside. She nudged Tom, who groggily got up to investigate. As he peered out the window, he saw their neighbor, old Mr. Jenkins, shambling across their front lawn. Something about his movements seemed off. Emily, still awake and scrolling through her phone, heard a strange scratching sound at her window, but the sound persisted, growing more intense with each passing moment. No response. As Mr. Jenkins turned, Tom's blood ran cold. The old man's eyes were milky white, his skin a sickly gray. A guttural moan escaped his lips as he lunged at Tom. Inside, Sarah heard Tom's terrified scream. She rushed to the door only to see her husband grappling with what used to be their neighbor. "Sarah! Tom!" Mr. Jenkins's teeth sank into Tom's arm, tearing flesh from bone. Emily, hearing the commotion, ran downstairs. The sight that greeted her was straight out of a nightmare. Her father was on the ground, blood pooling around him. Her mother stood paralyzed in the doorway, and shambling towards them were more figures, their movements jerky and unnatural. Reality crashed down upon them like a tidal wave. The dead were walking. The Johnsons realized their quiet life in Millbrook had come to a horrifying end. Section 5: Survival in a zombie-infested town. Sarah snapped out of her shock, her maternal instincts kicking in. She slammed the door shut, grabbing Emily's hand. "Sarah, we need to go now!" The sound of breaking glass echoed through the house as zombies began to force their way in. They ran into the garage, Sarah frantically searching for the car keys. Emily, still in shock, could only stare at the door separating them from the advancing horde. The zombies' moans grew louder, their decaying hands pounding against the thin wood. Sarah finally found the keys, her hands shaking as she unlocked the car. They climbed in just as the garage door splintered, the engine roared to life, and Sarah floored the accelerator. They burst through the garage door, zombies falling away from the speeding vehicle. As they drove through the streets of Millbrook, the full extent of the outbreak became clear. The town they had called home had transformed into a nightmarish hellscape in a matter of hours. Section 6: The Safe Haven. After hours of driving through the zombie-infested landscape, Sarah and Emily spotted a sign safe zone ahead. Hope flickered in their hearts. They approached a heavily fortified compound, guarded by armed soldiers. After a tense inspection, they were allowed inside. The safe zone was a converted high school. Hundreds of survivors milled about, their faces etched with fear and exhaustion. Sarah and Emily were directed to the gymnasium, now serving as a makeshift shelter. They collapsed onto cots, the events of the night finally catching up with them. As they tried to rest, snippets of conversation reached their ears. Theories about the outbreak flew around. Despite the relative safety, sleep eluded them. Sarah held Emily close, wondering how long this safe haven would truly last. Section 7. Betrayal from Within. Days passed in the safe zone. A semblance of routine began to form. Sarah volunteered in the medical tent, while Emily helped distribute rations. But beneath the surface, tensions were brewing. Resources were running low, and not everyone agreed on how to handle the crisis. One evening, as Sarah was finishing her shift, she overheard a heated argument. A group of survivors were planning to take control of the compound. They believed the military was hoarding supplies and planned to abandon them. Sarah's heart raced as she realized the danger they were in. She rushed to find Emily, her mind racing with plans of escape. But as she rounded a corner, she came face to face with one of the conspirators. "Conspirator, wouldn't want to raise the alarm now, would we?" Suddenly, gunshots rang out across the compound. The coup had begun. In the confusion, Sarah lost sight of Emily. Section 8. The Last Stand. The safe zone descended into anarchy. The military fought against the rebelling survivors, while zombies breached the weakened defenses. Sarah pushed through the panicked crowd, frantically searching for Emily. She spotted her daughter cornered by a group of the undead. Without hesitation, Sarah grabbed a nearby fire axe. "Sarah, Emily, run!" Emily scrambled away, narrowly avoiding grasping hands and snapping jaws. They made their way to the compound's gate, dodging bullets and zombies alike. The once safe haven had become a war zone. Fires raged, illuminating the night sky. Sarah and Emily fought their way through, determined to survive. As they reached the gate, they found it locked. Zombies were closing in from all sides. They braced themselves for the end, surrounded by the moans of the undead and the screams of the dying. Section 9. A Glimmer of Hope. Just as all seemed lost, a military helicopter appeared overhead. Its searchlight cut through the darkness, illuminating Sarah and Emily. A voice boomed from a loudspeaker. "Survivors identified! Initiating extraction!" Hope surged through them as a rope ladder descended from the chopper. Sarah pushed Emily towards the ladder. "Sarah, climb!" Emily hesitated, not wanting to leave her mother. Sarah gave her a reassuring nod, then turned to face the approaching zombies. She swung her axe, buying time for Emily to climb to safety. As Emily reached the helicopter, she looked down to see her mother surrounded by the undead. Tears streamed down her face as she screamed for Sarah. The soldiers pulled her into the chopper, restraining her as she tried to jump back down. The helicopter began to ascend, leaving the overrun compound behind. Emily felt a mix of relief and gut-wrenching loss. Section 10. The Shocking Discovery. The helicopter took Emily to a secret government facility. Scientists in hazmat suits ushered her into a sterile room. They explained that they had been studying the zombie outbreak, searching for a cure. But what they told her next shook her to her core. They had discovered that some individuals were immune to the zombie virus. These people could be bitten and not turn. The scientists believed Emily might be one of these rare immune individuals. They wanted to study her, hoping her blood might hold the key to saving humanity. As Emily processed this information, a familiar face entered the room. It was Sarah, alive and unharmed. Emily ran to her mother, sobbing with relief. But as they embraced, Emily felt something was off. Sarah had been bitten during their escape. Section 11. The Final Decision. The scientists explained their theory. Sarah's partial immunity had created a new type of zombie, one that retained human consciousness. They believed that studying both Sarah and Emily could lead to a cure, potentially saving millions of lives. But the process would be risky. With no guarantee of success, Emily was torn. The thought of losing her mother again was unbearable, but the possibility of ending the zombie apocalypse was too important to ignore. Sarah, despite her condition, was clear in her desire to help. "Sarah, we have to try." As they prepared for the experiments, news came in from the outside world. The zombie hordes were growing, civilization was on the brink of collapse. Emily looked at her mother, seeing the same strength and love that had gotten them this far. In the face of unimaginable horror, hope still flickered, a small flame against the encroaching darkness of the undead apocalypse.